What's going on, everybody? Welcome into my first NBA mock draft for the 2021 NBA draft. Now, I'm going to be doing probably 3 of these over here on Blazers Uprise. I will be dropping a couple over on a second channel that I haven't uploaded on in a while. It's for general NBA content. It's NBA Uprise. The link will be at the top of the description box below. Those mock drafts that I upload over there on that NBA Uprise channel, I'm going to try and do with trades. So those should be pretty fun. Draft order will get mixed up. I'm somebody who loves the draft. And I love this year's draft. It's an absolutely loaded draft. If the Blazers had a couple of picks in this draft, I would have been getting something like this to you a lot sooner. But I still want to push out a few mock drafts, so this is the first one. Before I start the mock draft, I should explain how my selection process kind of worked. Most of it is based off who I think teams would take, factoring in obviously prospect quality, factoring in fit on that respective team. I'm also factoring in a little bit of my own bias, a little bit of who I like for that team, and a little bit of who I think that team should take. So there's a couple surprise picks in this mock draft. Without further ado, let's kick things off with the first pick. In the NBA draft, I have the Detroit Pistons taking Cade Cunningham. This is a pretty obvious pick here for Detroit. I wouldn't mind if they went Evan Mobley. I don't necessarily have Cade Cunningham over Evan Mobley. I don't even necessarily have him over Jaylen Green. I really like Jaylen Green in this year's draft, but given all the fan pressure for Detroit to take Cade Cunningham and given how he could slot in pretty well next to Killian Hayes, hopefully Hayes is able to have a much better sophomore season than he did rookie year where he was injured. I like Cunningham's fit on this team. He goes number 1 to Detroit. With the second overall pick, I have the Houston Rockets taking Evan Mobley, the big man from USC. I think getting Evan Mobley in next to Christian Wood would be a very intriguing front court. Not just now, but especially in the future. I think Evan Mobley has a chance to be the next Anthony Davis. I think he has a chance to be an elite big man on both sides of the floor. He's an extremely good defensive player, rim protector, can hold his own when switched out onto smaller, quicker perimeter players. Offensively, he's just scratching the surface. He shot the ball decently well last year at USC. He definitely has a jump shot. He's able to put the ball on the ground. He's able to handle the ball a little bit. He has the chance to be a top 10 player someday, and I would not be shocked if that is the case. The top end talent in this draft is phenomenal. Evan Mobley 2 to Houston. Third overall, I have the Cleveland Cavaliers selecting Jaylen Green. Now, Jaylen Green is a weird fit next to Collin Sexton and Darius Garland. I think the Cavs should trade Collin Sexton this offseason. I would love a Garland and Green backcourt going forward for them. I think Green might end up being the best player out of this draft. I don't think that's that crazy of a thing to say. He's a phenomenal scorer. He should end up being a 25-point per game scorer at some point during his NBA career at least. I would be surprised if he didn't end up reaching that level. His scoring potential is the highest in this draft. Cade Cunningham's a more well-rounded player. Evan Mobley's a big man and has Defensive Player of the Year potential. So those guys might be better prospects, but in terms of pure scoring, Jaylen Green is it. He is it, and him and Garland going forward could be 2 All-Stars in the backcourt for Cleveland and the start of finally a legitimate rebuild without LeBron James. Fourth overall, I have the Toronto Raptors selecting Jalen Suggs, my guy, the point guard from Gonzaga. I'm a huge Gonzaga fan. I love Jalen Suggs. He was great for us last season. Too bad it couldn't result in a championship, but going to Toronto, I think this would be the start of a retooling effort. Last year, they had 2 point guards with Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet. I don't think Kyle Lowry comes back. I think it's very possible they could trade Fred VanVleet. I would want them to start Jalen Suggs right away if they end up drafting him at 4. You got a Jalen Suggs, Gary Trent Jr. backcourt of the future. That's a lot of fun for me as a Gary Trent Jr. fan as well. But Jalen Suggs just phenomenal defensive player, phenomenal court vision. It didn't really reflect in the assists per game number last year at Gonzaga, but I think he might be the best passer in this entire draft. I know some people will say a Josh Giddy or other names. I really love Jalen Suggs' playmaking. He's an all-around player, great athlete. The one worry about him is his scoring potential, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him approach 20 points per game in his prime. 5th overall, I have the Orlando Magic taking Kai Jones, the big man from Texas. Here's that sleeper pick. Here's that surprise pick. I love Kai Jones. He's been playing organized basketball for only 3.5 years. He is very young in terms of his basketball experience. And given that and some of the flashes of upside he showed at Texas, I have him going 5th here to Orlando. He is the most athletic big man in this draft class. I don't think that's even a debate. Watching him run the floor, it's beautiful to watch. It's fun to watch. Athleticism-wise, size-wise as a big, he's phenomenal. But he shows flashes of a step-back jumper, of a three-point jumper. I mean, he shows flashes of being an all-around player that can score in a variety of ways. And honestly, when I watch some of his highlights, and I know it's just highlights and you can't base prospects off of only highlights, but when I watch some of his highlights, I kind of get Giannis vibes. I don't know, man. I love Kai Jones. I know a lot of people have the Magic taking Kuminga here, but the Magic traded Aaron Gordon. They traded Vucevic away. Mo Bamba hasn't panned out. I feel like they need a big man for the future, and I feel like they're willing to swing for a home run pick here. And Kai Jones, out of everybody left on the board, I think has the highest ceiling. 6th overall, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder taking Jonathan Kuminga, which is a home run pick at this point in the draft. As I said, the top end talent in this draft is phenomenal. This guy might have been the 1st overall pick last season over Anthony Edwards. So OKC getting him at 6th after they didn't have the best lottery luck, they make out pretty well, getting a guy who can slot in at the 3 next to Bazley at the 4 and Poku at the 5, an athlete that can play off of Poku and his playmaking, but also a guy that can score the ball, also a guy that has defensive potential. He is a all-around prospect and sneakily could be one of the best players from this draft class, and this is a home run pick for the OKC Thunder. 7th overall, I have the Golden State Warriors taking Scottie Barnes. A lot of people have called Scottie Barnes a Draymond Green clone. Well, what better mentor for Scottie Barnes than Draymond Green himself? Golden State brings in Barnes to be the long-term Draymond Green replacement there in Golden State. If Scottie Barnes can learn how to shoot, he has a chance of being the best player from this draft. I know I'm saying that about a lot of players, but you have so many players with an extremely high ceiling. With a guy like Scottie Barnes, he is a 6'9" playmaking 4, athletic, a phenomenal defender, can handle the ball, basically has everything you want out of a modern day power forward, other than he has a very questionable jump shot. If he's able to figure that out and be a good shooter, watch out. 8th overall, I have the Orlando Magic going with more athleticism. They take Keon Johnson, the shooting guard out of Tennessee. This is maybe the best athlete in the draft. Offensively, he's still pretty raw, but he shows some flashes of being a guy you can give the ball to and he can go create his own bucket. He has to improve his jump shot in order to really become a good player in the NBA, but his jump shot isn't necessarily completely broken or anything, so this is kind of a boomer bust prospect in the lottery, and I have the Magic kind of taking some risks here, going with Kai Jones at 5 and Keon Johnson at 8. But they get the most athletic big and the most athletic perimeter player. They're chasing athleticism here. Keon Johnson is their pick at 8. 9th overall, I have the Kings going with Jaylen Johnson, the forward out of Duke, who cut his season short last year to prepare for the draft. Doesn't end up costing him too much if he goes at 9. He's been a guy who's been a projected top 10 pick pretty much all season long until he decided to stop playing for Duke. He goes here to Sacramento, who could be looking for a forward long-term. They have their backcourt long-term. They got De'Aaron Fox. They got Tyrese Halliburton. Buddy Hield's there. They also got DeLon Wright. They kind of have a logjam at the guard position. The forward positions, they're probably going to trade Marvin Bagley. Harrison Barnes, I feel like, is a guy that they could look to move off of in the next year or two and try and get value back for him. They don't really have a long-term piece at the forward position, so getting a guy like a Jaylen Johnson who has some playmaking ability, has some defensive potential. The key for him, like with a Scottie Barnes, is going to be he has to be able to shoot the ball. You're going to want a guy here who can play off of De'Aaron Fox, who can play off of Tyrese Halliburton. If he can learn how to shoot, he has some all-star potential, but that's a swing factor for him. In the modern-day NBA, which involves a lot of threes, the swing factor for a lot of prospects is the three-point shot, and that is the case with Jaylen Johnson here at 9 to Sacramento. At number 10, I have the New Orleans Pelicans going with Moses Moody, who is the prototypical 3-and-D shooting guard here for New Orleans. I think they need to pursue a long-term 3-and-D wing to fit next to Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. They need to space the floor a little bit better for those guys. This past season, they had Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams playing a lot of minutes. That's not really ideal when you're trying to surround Ingram and Williamson with players that fit them. Moses Moody fits them perfectly, fits them like a glove. He would be a great fit on a lot of teams. 3-and-D players fit him pretty much anywhere they go, and he has a little bit more upside beyond that. Might be able to be a guy who can create a shot off the dribble a little bit, and then if he's able to do that, if he's able to shoot the three ball well, maybe you're talking about a guy who can be a 15 to 20 point per game scorer. At number 11, I have the Charlotte Hornets taking Davion Mitchell, the guard out of Baylor. I love Mitchell's fit on this Charlotte Hornets team next to LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball is a 6'7" point guard. Davion Mitchell is 6 feet tall, so he has the size of a point guard. In terms of his playstyle, he's more of a combo guard to me, so idealistically, you'd want to fit a Davion Mitchell with a big playmaking guard or wing, and LaMelo Ball is that. I think that is the backcourt fit of the future if they're able to take Davion Mitchell at 11. I know they have Terry Rozier. I know they have Devontae Graham, so they already have a logjam there, but I think they need to think a little bit more long-term and find a guy who complements LaMelo Ball well, and that's Mitchell, because he's a great defender, phenomenal defender, has some off-the-dribble ability. A lot of people think he's related to Donovan Mitchell because he wears the number 45. He kind of moves and is built like Donovan Mitchell, but he's not related to Donovan Mitchell. I thought that was a crazy coincidence. But Davion Mitchell, 11 to Charlotte. 12th overall, I have the San Antonio Spurs going with Alperen Sengun, the center out of Turkey. Some people have dubbed him the next Nikola Jokic. San Antonio loves their international prospects. They could use a center of the future. While I think Jakob Poeltl is underrated, it's time for San Antonio to hit the full rebuild button. And getting a guy like Sengun here would be a phenomenal pickup for them at 12. A guy that kind of fits their MO from previous years in the draft. And a guy who Popovich, if he remains in San Antonio, can mold and help him become the best version of himself. So a playmaking big who has a three-point shot and a lot of offensive potential. I like Sengun's game. Defensively, I have a lot of question marks about him, but offensively, in a game that is moving towards more skilled bigs, Sengun fits that mold. 13th overall, I have the Indiana Pacers going with James Bouknight, the shooting guard out of UConn. It's really hard to figure out a prospect for Indiana. They have a ton of talent at a number of positions. They just don't have enough top-end talent to really make them a difference maker in the playoffs. That's kind of been their problem for a while now. So you got a lot of wings in there. I think they need to consolidate, and getting a guy who could maybe play right away and be a scoring punch off the bench in Bouknight here could make it easier for them to move off some of those wing pieces that they already have. And it would make it possible for them to consolidate some of their solid talent for maybe some better high-end talent. 14th overall, I have the Golden State Warriors taking Corey Kispert, the small forward out of Gonzaga. I love Corey Kispert's fit on Golden State. He is a terrific three-point shooter and a terrific transition player. Golden State loves to play in transition. They love to shoot a lot of threes. I think he could fit in there next to Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green and help them really get back to that style of basketball that helped them win championships. He has some questions on the defensive end, but having a guy like Draymond could help him out a little bit. This is just a great fit pick. He doesn't necessarily have a ton of upside, but the Warriors went upside at 7 with Scottie Barnes, and they're a team that's going to try to contend next year, and I think Corey Kispert Kispert could be slotted in, maybe even as the starting 3 right away, and help them do so. 15th overall, I have the Washington Wizards taking Josh Giddy, the point forward out of Australia. This is just an upside pick. I think the Wizards need to hit the rebuild button, trade Bradley Beal, trade Russell Westbrook. I don't think you can get anything for him, but I just think they need to hard reset and go after young players with a lot of upside. Josh Giddy is a steal at this point in the draft. At least that's what a lot of mock drafters would say, because pretty much all of them have him in the lottery. I think there's a couple guys that are going to fall in this draft because you have so many good players and you have a lot of good sleepers at later points in this draft that could rise up if a team really likes them. Josh Giddy falls a little bit and ends up going 15th to Washington. He's not really a guy that's going to help them win, so if they're looking to hit the rebuild button, starting it off with getting Josh Giddy at 15, I think would be a really good pickup. Josh Giddy, just for a little information on him, 6'8", playmaking point guard. Questionable 3-point shot. Kind of reminds you of Ben Simmons, but not really. He's not the athlete or the physical specimen that Ben Simmons is, but just another Australian player coming in with a ton of size, whose biggest strength is his playmaking ability. And, you know, hopefully he doesn't completely suck at shooting threes like Ben Simmons does. I don't think that'll be the case. If he's able to become a shooter, I say this about everybody, but if he's able to shoot the ball, he will unlock a higher level of upside. 16th overall, I have the OKC Thunder taking Usman Garuba, the power forward out of Spain. Really good defensive player. Pretty raw offensively, but has some upside on that end. I like Garuba's fit here, 16th to OKC. 17th, I have the Memphis Grizzlies taking Quentin Grimes, the shooting guard out of Houston. This, a lot of people might say, is a little bit of a reach, but I've fallen in love with Quentin Grimes' offensive and defensive capabilities. He's a 3-and-D guy that I think has upside to be a little bit more, to be a guy who does a little bit off the dribble as well. I think long-term, if he's able to reach his ceiling, he's a seamless fit in the backcourt next to Ja Morant. I really like Quentin Grimes here from Memphis. I think they need to try and find a 2-guard of the future. And there might be some players that they might reach on instead of a Quentin Grimes. Maybe it's a Josh Primo, or maybe they go a more conventional, safer route and take a guy that is higher on a lot of people's boards than a Quentin Grimes. But I like Quentin Grimes' fit here in Memphis. I feel like Grimes has been a little bit underrated so far in this draft process, so I have him going 17th to Memphis. 18th overall, I have the OKC Thunder taking Zaire Williams. This is their 3rd pick in this draft. They take Kuminga at 6, Garuba at 16, and Williams at 18. That's 3 forwards, but they could definitely go for some forward types, and they're kind of in position to go for the best player available. Zaire Williams he has the highest upside at this point in the draft, so I like OKC taking him there. Now, maybe long-term you're not able to keep all 4 of Kuminga, Garuba, Williams, and Bazley, but you would just hope that 3 of those guys pan out, and that is your 3 forward rotation going forward as those guys reach their prime. 19th overall, I have the New York Knicks taking Jared Butler, the combo guard out of Baylor. This guy just screams New York Knicks to me. They need some guard depth. They had a lot of point guards last year, but outside of Derrick Rose, and maybe you consider Emmanuel Quickley one, none of them were really worthwhile. I think Quickley's a little bit more of a 2, and Derrick Rose might not return to New York. He's a free agent this offseason, so they could definitely go for some guard depth. And considering they were a playoff team with home court advantage in the first round this past postseason, I feel like they're in position to go for a guy that maybe has a little bit of long-term upside, but can help them win now, and that is Jared Butler. A lot of you, if you paid any attention to college basketball, will be familiar with him, a national champion at Baylor. He was part of that dynamic backcourt with Davion Mitchell, who went earlier in this draft. He's a guy that can create his own shot at a pretty high level. I think that'll translate to the NBA. He's a hard-nosed defender. He's a guy that can play on both ends of the court, and he's a guy that you can give the ball to. He can make things happen, but he can also catch and shoot. He can play off of other players, so it'll be pretty easy to fit him into an NBA offense and give him a bit of a role off the bench as a guard. 20th overall, I have the Atlanta Hawks taking Trey Mann, the combo guard out of Florida. A lot of people say Trey Mann's just a point guard, and the Atlanta Hawks need a long-term backup point guard, so that is the thought process for this pick. But considering how good this draft is and the quality of players that are available here at 20, I want Atlanta to take a guy who, if he's able to reach his ceiling, he has room to step into a starting role next to Trae Young. Sharif Cooper, if he went here, standing at 6 feet tall and not the best three-point shooter, he could be a good backup point guard to Trae Young, but he'll never be a good fit as a starting guard next to Trae Young. That backcourt just wouldn't work. Trey Mann stands 6 feet 5 inches tall, so hypothetically he has the size to be a 2 guard. He has to put on weight in order to hold his own at that position, but I assume he'll be able to do so. So he's a guy who I just visualize as the backup point guard for Trae Young, and if he's able to develop well, would have room to step into a starting role. 21st overall, I have the Knicks taking JT Thor, the big man out of Auburn. He has a 9'2" standing reach. He's very athletic for his size. He's raw offensively, but shows flashes of a jump shot, shows flashes of being able to do things off the dribble. He's a guy who, in the later part of the first round, will probably have some of the biggest upside left in the draft. And the Knicks, they take Jared Butler to shore up their backcourt position, a guy who's ready to help them now. JT Thor is a little bit more of a project and can provide them some depth in the front court. Long term, I think that he'll be able to fit next to Mitchell Robinson if he develops well. If not, he could be a very good backup center if he's able to develop well. So I like JT Thor here, 21 to New York. 22, I have the Lakers taking Chris Duarte, the guard out of Oregon. It's rumored that Chris Duarte has a draft promise. I have no idea who that is, but he seems like a good fit for the Lakers, who seem to reshuffle wings all the time. He could be a guy that could provide some long-term stability at that position. He's a guy that's able to score the ball, able to shoot the ball. They need more dynamic offensive players other than LeBron James and Anthony Davis and Dennis Schroeder, who I think is overrated. Chris Duarte would likely end up being the oldest player taken in the first round. The Lakers are a team that's trying to win another championship after doing so last season. They don't care about the age thing. They're trying to take somebody that can help them win now. I think Chris Duarte here at 22 to LA could step in and be a role player and help them win some games. With the 23rd pick, I have the Rockets taking Franz Wagner. This is lower than I've seen him mocked, but as I said earlier in this video, I think there's so much talent in this draft that you're going to see a guy like a Franz Wagner or a Josh Giddy fall in the draft. And Franz Wagner did not have the best March Madness. He struggled in their Elite 8 game. He's a guy who it's just hard to envision what he's going to be at the NBA level, because there was times at Michigan where he would play and you'd just be like, wow, this guy looks amazing. And there were times where he would completely disappear. He's a solid defensive player. He can play make a bit at the forward spots, a lot of those guys in this draft, and he can shoot the ball, but I'm not sure he can do anything at a high enough level to really separate himself in the NBA, and that's why I have him falling here 23rd overall to Houston. He could end up being a really good player. I just don't have as much confidence in him reaching his ceiling or approaching his ceiling as I do some other players taken before him in this mock draft. The Rockets have back-to-back picks, so with 24, they take Nashon Highland, aka Bones Hyland, the shooting guard out of VCU. Hyland is a 6'2" score-first guard. Kind of reminds you a little bit of an Emmanuel Quickley. He had a good draft combine showing that will help raise his stock into the first round, in my opinion. The problem with him is he's 6'2". He's skinny. There's a reason his nickname is Bones. He doesn't really play like a point guard. He's not a great facilitator. He's not the best ball handler. So he's a shooting guard in a point guard's body. So you want to pair him next to a bigger playmaking point forward or a bigger point guard. So with Kevin Porter Jr. labeling himself a point guard, I actually like Hyland's and Kevin Porter Jr.'s fit in the backcourt long term there in Houston. Hyland is a really good transition player, loves to push the pace. I think that fits in well with Evan Mobley, who the Rockets took number 2, Christian Wood, who they have there as well. I feel like it fits in well with Kevin Porter Jr. pushing the pace in transition and just being a run and gun team. I like Hyland's fit 24th to Houston. 25th overall, I have the Clippers taking Trey Murphy III, a forward out of Virginia. This guy's a 3-and-D forward with athleticism, which is a perfect fit for the Clippers. I think his value is higher than the 25th overall pick. I think he's one of the top 20 players in this draft for sure, but he falls to 25 here to the Clippers. doesn't necessarily have the ceiling as a lot of other guys in this draft, but his floor is extremely high for being taken with the 25th overall pick here to LA. He's a guy who could slot in and replace Nick Batum's role potentially. He's not a guy that's going to try and do too much offensively. He's a guy that kind of knows his strengths and his limitations, and getting a guy that can shoot the three, can play good defense, and is athletic, so in transition or as a cutter can be a player that can do some damage. I think that fits in very well to whatever the Los Angeles Clippers have going on next season. I'm assuming they run it back with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and then address maybe the point guard situation in free agency or via trade. Getting back a forward that could fit into the rotation with Trey Murphy at 25 would be great value for the Clippers. 26th overall, I have the Denver Nuggets taking Isaiah Jackson, power forward out of Kentucky. He's a guy who's raw, doesn't necessarily shoot the ball too well, but is an athletic freak. And having a good defensive player who is an athletic freak at the 4 next to Nikola Jokic's playmaking at the 5 seems ideal for me. It seems like he would be a good long-term complement to Nikola Jokic. Maybe he never ends up starting, but he's a guy that you could slot in off the bench, sub him into the game next to a Jokic, and I feel like those guys' chemistry could be pretty good once they develop some. So Isaiah Jackson, 26 overall to Denver. 27th, I have the Nets taking Roko Prkašin, power forward out of Croatia. They need some long-term depth at the 4 spot. They kind of have recycled power forwards for what feels like a few years now. Obviously, now you got Kevin Durant at that position, but Jeff Green was the backup 4, started some games at the 4 last season for Brooklyn. He's a guy that could end up leaving in free agency for them. I don't think Prkašin is going to be a guy who's going to be able to be a rotation player right away, but long-term, maybe in the next 2-3 years, could be a guy that surprises people a little bit and develops into a pretty decent backup 4. 28th overall, I have the Philadelphia 76ers taking Joel Ayayi, shooting guard out of Gonzaga. Ayayi is a perfect fit on this team. He's a terrific cutter, a good three-point shooter, a solid defender, a really good offensive rebounder. He's a guy who fits in seamlessly into the NBA. At Gonzaga, he had a role that was a complementary role. There was a ton of talent on that Gonzaga team, and he played the complementary role perfectly. He was a guy that could play off guys really well, but when it was needed, he was also a guy that could step up and make some shots as well. I feel like that role will be identical in the NBA, so I think his game transitions seamlessly to the NBA. Having a guy like a Ben Simmons to play off of with his cutting ability, with his floor spacing ability, he's also a guy that can maybe be a secondary playmaker long term. I love Joel Ayayi's fit on this 76ers team. They do have a logjam at this position, so maybe they'd have to clear that up a little bit, but Ayayi is a guy who I think is being slept on and is a guy who could step in and maybe play right away for a decent team, playing the same role he did last year at Gonzaga. 29th overall, I have the Phoenix Suns taking Day'Ron Sharpe, a center out of North Carolina. Honestly, I don't know a whole lot about Day'Ron Sharpe. He's a guy that doesn't necessarily seem like the most glamorous pick, but the Phoenix Suns need a backup center. They tried to potentially address that spot by taking Jalen Smith 10th overall last year. He did not have the rookie season that some people envisioned him having. Maybe he can step up and grow into that role, but if not, maybe Day'Ron Sharpe can. He looked to have a three-point jumper during pre-draft workouts. His shot looked pretty smooth, so maybe he has some shooting potential, but he didn't really shoot the ball all that much at North Carolina last year. So if he's not a shooter, he'll be a guy that can play some defense, rebound, just your prototypical backup big man stuff. And with the last pick in this mock draft, 30th overall, the Utah Jazz select Ayo Dosunmu, the guard out of Illinois, one of the best players in college basketball last year. I was a guy who could step in and potentially play right away, but wouldn't necessarily have to with Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, and Jordan Clarkson there. However, I like his fit as the third guard behind a Mike Conley and a Donovan Mitchell. He stands at 6'5". He is a big combo guard who can play on or off the ball. So next to a guy like a Donovan Mitchell, I think that's an intriguing fit. That could be the fit long term if Ayo's able to develop properly. I like this pick a lot for the Jazz. And that wraps up this mock draft. Hopefully you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought about some of these selections down in the comment section below. Is there somebody I'm sleeping on? Is there somebody that I'm too high on? Let me know. I enjoy reading your comments. And anyway, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Until next time, I'm out of here. As always, peace out. Go Blazers.